an operating room and all of the doctors in it. Who do you think earns the most money? It's the anesthesiologist. Using drugs like lidocaine, they carefully suppress our nervous systems while still keeping us alive. As recently as the late 1800s, though, doctors used chloroform or ether to knock patients out. Nowadays, ether is more popular for what it can become. Add a water molecule and you have ethanol, which when fermented, creates a substance that you might be familiar with.
To alcohol, the cause of and solution to all of life's problems.
By now, you've been taught that alcohol is a depressant, and it is. But let's be accurate. Alcohol just isn't a depressant, it's also an anesthetic. So when you have one of these, to your brain, it's more like this. Anesthesiologists need to suppress a patient's central nervous system without shutting it completely off. While the anesthesiologist, though, is carefully measuring and monitoring the dose of the anesthetic, how do we measure our alcohol amounts? Well, let's just say we're not as careful. So what happens to the brain when someone consumes alcohol?
Let me explain. Alcohol enters the body and ends up in the stomach, at which point about 20% is absorbed immediately, and the other 80% is absorbed in the small intestine. The heart then pumps the absorbed alcohol to every part of the body, including the central nervous system, which consists of the brain and spinal cord, and it gets to the brain really fast. So that's why even after just one drink you can feel lightheaded or relaxed. Alcohol acts primarily on the nerve cells within the brain and interferes with communication between nerve cells and all other cells, slowing everything down. And that's why when we drink even a little, we experience the effects of alcohol on our emotions, judgment, balance, memory, speech, and anger levels, just to name a few. Did you know that your brain is still developing until you're around 20 to 25? So we need to be really careful because alcohol can do some irreversible damage to various parts of our brains. For example, drinking affects the cerebral cortex, which controls our senses, and inhibitory centers, which is why when you drink, you become more talkative, more self-confident, and less socially inhibited. It also controls our thought processes, so alcohol affects our ability to make good judgment or think clearly. The brain's frontal lobes are important for planning, forming ideas, making decisions, and using self-control. So when alcohol affects the frontal lobes of the brain, you may find it hard to control emotions and urges, and you may act without thinking, and even sometimes become violent or act completely out of character. Does this sound familiar? The cerebellum is important for coordination, thinking, and being aware. So again, you may have trouble with these skills when alcohol affects the cerebellum. That's why people affected by alcohol sometimes can't walk properly or lose their balance and fall. The hippocampus is the part of the brain where memories are made. So when alcohol reaches the hippocampus, you may have trouble remembering something you just heard, or even worse, have a blackout and not be able to remember what you did last night. If alcohol damages the hippocampus, you may find it hard to learn or remember things in the future. The hypothalamus is a small part of the brain that does an amazing number of the body's housekeeping chores. After a person drinks alcohol, blood pressure, hunger, thirst, and the urge to urinate increases, while body temperature and heart rate decreases. And finally, the medulla controls the body's automatic actions, such as your heartbeat. It also keeps the body at the right temperature. Because alcohol chills the body, drinking a lot of alcohol outdoors in cold weather can cause a person's body temperature to fall below normal. This dangerous condition is called hypothermia.
The more you drink, the more that alcohol affects your brain, and the more danger it brings. So how can you tell who's in danger and who's still okay? You might think about using safe or unsafe BAC levels. That's blood alcohol content, BAC, the percentage of alcohol in your bloodstream. But since you won't be carrying a breathalyzer with you, it's not a very helpful tool. The best way to tell is by knowing how the progressive effects of alcohol manifest in a person's outward behavior. We call this the brain chart, and it breaks the effect of alcohol on the brain into 3 different categories: the social zone, the risky zone, and the danger zone. On the right-hand side, you can see the progressive effect of alcohol on the brain in terms of general central nervous system categories. The more one drinks, we can see the depressive effect on their intellect, their emotions, their gross motor skills, their semi-involuntary functions, and finally, involuntary functions, including the vital functions like your heartbeat and breathing. In the video, we saw how alcohol first impacts the cerebral cortex and the frontal lobes. The alcohol is beginning to anesthetize our intellect and our emotions. This is the social zone of drinking, where just a few drinks, just enough, starts to produce that joyous, relaxed feeling because caution has been depressed and there's decreased emotional control as well. A person's judgment is starting to become impaired. Your friends start to think that they have better dancing skills than they actually do. Otherwise, alcohol consumption in the social zone is low risk. You can drink to that. Keep drinking though, and you enter the risky zones. The risky zone is where we see a lot of that stereotypical drunk behavior, the emotional mood swings, the loss of balance and coordination, slurred speech, delayed reaction times, and impaired judgment. When alcohol hits the cerebellum, where coordination and perception live, a person's gross motor skills are getting their dose of the alcohol anesthetic. At the same time, alcohol is being absorbed by the hypothalamus and the hippocampus, decreasing control over one's semi-voluntary functions, like the gag reflex. A big sign that you're in the risky zone is vomiting, which is your body's attempt to expel the excess of alcohol. This excess of alcohol anesthetizes the ability to feel pain. Programs like Tosh.0 and Jackass teach us to laugh at these types of scenes, but accidents happening in the risky zone can turn fatal. In August 2013, on the second day of Indiana University's freshman orientation, Rachel Feeney went to an off-campus party. She consumed alcohol, and she slipped down a flight of stairs and hit her head. Rachel didn't seem hurt, and her friends didn't think she was too intoxicated, so they left her to sleep it off. 6 or 7 hours later, she was found unresponsive, and 911 was finally called. But it was too late. Her mother packed up her dorm room before classes even began. If the risky circumstances surrounding alcohol aren't fatal, a person can die from alcohol overdose itself. The hypothalamus, which controls the central nervous system's semi-voluntary functions, also controls the involuntary function, like digestion and your body's ability to keep itself warm. And drink enough, and the medulla is depressed, and we can no longer control our vital functions. This is the danger zone of drinking, where the involuntary reflexes and vital functions are being anesthetized. And like any anesthetized patient, you no longer have control over your body. That's why people sometimes urinate or soil themselves, because they've lost their bladder or bowel function. Often people will lose consciousness as well, which is why choking on your own vomit while passed out is such a danger. We call it the danger zone for a reason. Each year, over 1,800 18 to 24-year-olds die due to alcohol-related incidents, and over 500,000 people under the age of 21 will experience alcohol-related injuries. All across the country, and even here at home. The good news is, it's easy to tell who's in danger and who's not. You just need to watch the outward behavior of your friends and strangers. You might be wondering how tolerance comes into play, and that's a good question, and one that we're going to talk about in a few moments. Our best times at Northwestern are shared, so take care of each other and keep watch, so you'll know where the drinking moves from social to stop.
Drinkwise Australia for their generosity in granting funding for a major portion of this production. Australian Lions Drug Awareness Foundation for their input and support throughout the production of this presentation.